It was a regular Tuesday evening in downtown Atlanta, and I was just another guy heading home, my briefcase swinging lightly in my hand, my mind already on tomorrow's meetings. The city buzzed around me, cars honking, people chatting outside cafes. Then, out of nowhere, a police cruiser screeched to a halt beside me. Before I could process it, an officer was barking orders, his hand on his holster, and cold steel clicked around my wrists. The crowd stopped, staring, some pulling out phones, others whispering. My skin color was apparently all the evidence they needed. But this story has a twist nobody saw coming, and it changed everything. My name's Marcus Thompson, and I grew up in a small house on the edge of Savannah, Georgia, where my mom worked double shifts to keep us afloat. I was the kid who stayed up late, poring over books, determined to make something of myself. By 22, I'd earned a law degree from Emory University, one of the proudest moments of my life. I chose law because I believed in justice, in systems that could protect people like me, black, working class, always under scrutiny. But the real world wasn't like the textbooks. Despite my degree, I landed a low-level paralegal job at a mid-sized Atlanta firm, not the corner office I dreamed of. I worked harder than my colleagues, stayed late, double-checked every detail, just to prove I belonged. Still, clients hesitated when they saw me, their eyes lingering on my skin before my credentials. I'd faced this before. In high school, teachers assumed I'd cheat because I aced tests they didn't expect me to. At Emory, classmates whispered I only got in through affirmative action, never mind my near perfect LSAT score. Even in Atlanta, a city proud of its diversity, I'd get followed in stores or hear locks click when I walked by cars. Each time, I swallowed the sting, told myself it was just part of the climb. I wore my suit sharp, kept my tone professional, and carried my employee badge like a shield. But no matter how many cases I closed or hours I billed, the world saw me first as a black man, not a lawyer. That label followed me everywhere, like a shadow I couldn't shake. By 30, I'd learned to live with it, but it never stopped gnawing at me. I wasn't just fighting for a career, I was fighting to be seen as human. That Tuesday evening, walking home with my briefcase, I had no idea how much worse it could get, or how one moment would force me to confront it all head on. The sun was dipping low over Atlanta's skyline, casting long shadows on Peachtree Street as I walked home that Tuesday. My briefcase felt heavier than usual, stuffed with case files I'd been reviewing all day. I was mentally mapping out tomorrow's deposition when a police cruiser pulled up sharp, tires screeching against the curb. Two officers stepped out, one tall and broad, his hand already resting on his gun. "Hey, you!" he barked, his voice cutting through the hum of the city. "Stop right there." I froze, my heart kicking up a notch. People on the sidewalk slowed, their eyes darting between me and the officers. A woman clutched her coffee cup tighter. A guy in a suit pulled out his phone, not to help, but to record. The tall officer, badge glinting under the streetlight, stepped closer. "Where you headed? What's in the bag?" His tone wasn't curious, it was accusing. I kept my voice steady, explaining I was a paralegal, just leaving work, heading home. He cut me off. "Don't get smart. We got a call about a break-in nearby. You fit the description?" My stomach twisted. Fit the description. I'd heard that phrase before, always code for my skin color. I tried again, slower, telling him my name, my job, pointing to my badge. In my pocket, he didn't even glance at it. "Hands where I can see them," he snapped, his partner circling behind me. The crowd grew, maybe 10, 12 people now, watching like I was some kind of street performance. Before I could say another word, the tall officer grabbed my wrist, twisting it behind my back. Cold metal clamped around my skin as he slapped on handcuffs. "You're coming with us until we sort this out," he said, shoving me toward the cruiser. My briefcase hit the ground. Papers spilling out. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "What did he do?" Another voice answered, "Probably something." My face burned, not from shame, but from the sheer weight of their stares. I'd spent my life proving I wasn't a stereotype, and in seconds, this cop reduced me to one. I tried to speak, to ask what I was being charged with, but he shut me down. "Save it for the station." Inside, I was screaming. I'd studied law to fight injustice, not to be its punching bag. My mind raced. Every case I'd read about wrongful arrests, every statistic about racial profiling. But standing there, hands cuffed, I felt small, powerless. The second officer picked up my briefcase, tossing it carelessly into the cruiser's trunk. The crowd kept watching, some filming, none stepping forward. I wanted to shout that I was a lawyer, that I knew my rights, but the words stuck in my throat. All I could think was, this is happening, right now, to me, and no one cares enough to stop it. The handcuffs bit into my wrists, cold and unyielding, as the tall officer pushed me against the cruiser's hood. The metal was still warm from the engine, a stark contrast to the chill running down my spine. Peachtree Street, usually just a noisy blur of commuters and tourists, felt like a stage now, with me as the unwilling lead. The crowd had swelled to at least 20 people, a mix of suits, joggers, and baristas on break. Some held phones, their cameras trained on me like I was a zoo exhibit. Others muttered to each other, their words too low to catch, but heavy with judgment. A woman in a red coat shook her head, her lips pursed. I wanted to scream that I hadn't done anything, but my voice felt trapped, like it would only make things worse. "Keep your hands still," the officer growled, patting me down with deliberate roughness. His name tag read Officer Hayes. His partner, shorter and quieter, stood by the cruiser, rifling through my briefcase like it was evidence of a crime. Papers fluttered onto the pavement, contracts I'd spent hours drafting. "Careful with those," I said, my voice tight but calm. Hayes snorted. "You don't tell me how to do my job." He leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "People like you always think you're smarter than us." "People like you." The words landed like a punch, each syllable dripping with the assumption that I was a problem, not a person. I glanced at the crowd. A guy in a hoodie zoomed in with his phone, his face blank, like he was filming a car crash. A teenage girl whispered to her friend, giggling nervously. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody said, "Hey, maybe you've got the wrong guy." My chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of being reduced to nothing. I'd faced this before. Store clerks trailing me, neighbors eyeing me like I didn't belong. But this was different. This was public, deliberate, and backed by a badge. My law degree, my late nights at the firm, my clean record, none of it mattered. To Hayes, I was just another black guy who fit the description. I tried reasoning again. "Officer, my ID's in my wallet. My employee badge is right there. I work at Carter and Reed. The law firm 2 blocks over Hayes didn't even look up." "Shut up and stay put," he snapped, shoving me harder against the car. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a low hum of speculation. Someone said, "He must have done something serious." My face burned. I wanted to turn, to stare them down, to force them to see me, but the cuffs kept my hands locked behind my back. My mind churned. I knew the law, knew I had rights, but saying that now felt like poking a bear. Hayes wasn't here to listen. He was here to prove a point. Inside, I was unraveling. Anger mixed with helplessness, a toxic cocktail that made my hands shake in the cuffs. I thought of my mom, working those double shifts, telling me to keep my head down and stay out of trouble. I thought of every time I'd bitten my tongue to avoid this exact situation. And yet, here I was, pinned like a criminal for walking home. The worst part? Nobody in that crowd saw me as Marcus Thompson, the guy who'd clawed his way through Emory law. They saw what Hayes saw: a threat, a stereotype, a nobody. But something in me shifted. I wasn't going to let this be the end of it. I'd spent too long proving myself to let this guy strip me of everything. I just needed a way to turn this around. The cruiser's hood was still pressed against my chest, the metal now cooling as the Atlanta evening deepened. Officer Hayes loomed behind me, his radio crackling with static, while his partner tossed the last of my papers back into my briefcase. The crowd hadn't thinned. 25, maybe 30 people now, their faces a blur of curiosity and judgment. My wrists ached from the cuffs, but the real pain was the weight of their stares, each one assuming I was exactly what Hayes thought: a criminal. I'd spent my life dodging this moment, keeping my head down, my suits pressed, my words measured. But standing there, reduced to a suspect, for no reason other than my skin, something snapped. I wasn't going to let this be my story. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay even. "Officer Hayes," I said, loud enough for the crowd to hear, "I'm asking for my right to make a call. You haven't charged me with anything, and I know you can't hold me without cause." He froze, his hand halfway to his radio. His partner, Officer Grant, looked up from my briefcase, eyebrows raised. The crowd shifted, a few people leaning in, sensing a change. Hayes smirked, but it was thinner now, less certain. "You don't get to make demands," he said, stepping closer. "We're still checking you out." Then check my ID," I pressed, keeping my tone firm but calm. "It's in my wallet, front pocket. My employee badge is there too. Carter and Reed, the law firm on West Peachtree? Call them. They'll confirm who I am." I could feel the crowd listening, their murmurs quieting. A woman, in a blue scarf, lowered her phone, her eyes narrowing, like she was actually seeing me for the first time. Hayes hesitated, glancing at Grant, who shrugged. "Fine," Hayes muttered, pulling my wallet from my pocket with a rough tug. He flipped it open, his fingers pausing on my firm badge, the gold-embossed logo catching the streetlight. I seized the moment. "You can also call my supervisor, Karen Mitchell. Her number's on the back of the badge. She's probably still at the office. She'll tell you I was there all day, working on a deposition for a federal case." My voice grew steadier, louder, each word a brick in the wall I was building. Hayes didn't respond, but his jaw tightened. He handed the badge to Grant, who started typing something into his phone. The crowd was quieter now, a few people exchanging glances. A man in a gray hoodie muttered, "He's a lawyer?" to the guy next to him. I felt a spark of hope, but I wasn't done. "I'm not just some guy you can pin this on," I said, turning my head to meet Hayes's eyes. "You stopped me because of a vague description, but you didn't ask for details. You didn't check my story. You saw me and decided I was guilty. That's not how this works." My heart was pounding, but I kept going. "There's a dozen people here with phones. They're recording. They're watching. If you're wrong, this doesn't end with me." Hayes's smirk vanished. He stepped back, his hand hovering near his radio, like he wasn't sure what to do next. I turned my attention to the crowd. "If anyone here saw what happened, I need you to speak up. I was just walking home. I didn't break any laws. I worked 2 blocks from here." My voice carried, and a few heads turned. The woman in the blue scarf stepped forward, hesitant. "I saw it," she said, her voice shaky but clear. "He wasn't doing anything. You just pulled up and grabbed him." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and a couple of others nodded. A young guy in a delivery uniform raised his phone. "I got it on video," he said, holding it up like a trophy. Grant was on the phone now, speaking in low tones. I caught Karen's name and the words "paralegal" and "Carter and Reed." Hayes's face was unreadable, but his posture had shifted, less cocky, more guarded. I kept my eyes on him, refusing to look away. My mind was racing, piecing together a plan. If Karen confirmed my identity, Hayes would have to back off. If the crowd kept filming, there'd be evidence. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. Every black man who'd been in my shoes, every person who'd felt this humiliation was standing with me. I wasn't going to let Hayes write the ending to this story. Not tonight. Grant hung up, his face pale. He leaned toward Hayes and muttered something I couldn't hear. Hayes's eyes flicked to me, then back to the badge in his hand. For the first time, he looked uncertain. I straightened, despite the cuffs, and spoke directly to him. You made a mistake, officer. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The crowd was dead silent now, waiting. So was I. The air on Peachtree Street felt thicker now, the crowd's silence pressing in as Officer Hayes clutched my badge, his knuckles whitening. My wrists were still cuffed, the metal digging deeper with every minute, but I stood taller, my eyes locked on his. The woman in the blue scarf held her phone steady, recording, while the delivery guy in the gray hoodie nodded at me, his video still rolling. Officer Grant, the quieter one, shifted uncomfortably, his phone now tucked away after his call to my firm. The streetlights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on Hayes's face, which was no longer smug but tense, like he'd just stepped into something he couldn't control. Grant cleared his throat, stepping closer to Hayes. It checks out, he said, his voice low but audible. Karen Mitchell at Carter and Reed confirmed he's a paralegal there. Been with them 3 years. She's on her way now. Hayes's jaw clenched, his eyes darting to me, then to the crowd, which had grown to nearly 40 people. A few whispered to each other, their words sharp enough to catch. Lawyer, wrong guy, typical. My heart was still pounding, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was clarity. This wasn't just about me. It was about every person who'd been profiled, cuffed, or worse, because of what they looked like. Hayes tried to regain control. Doesn't mean you're clear, he said, his voice gruffer than before. We still need to verify everything, but his tone lacked the bite it had earlier. He fumbled with my badge, flipping it over like it might reveal some hidden flaw. I didn't flinch. Verify what? I asked, loud enough for the crowd to hear. You stopped me without cause. You didn't check my ID until I made you. You assumed I was guilty because of my skin. That's what this is. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The woman in the scarf gasped softly, and the delivery guy muttered, "Damn right." Before Hayes could respond, a black SUV pulled up, its tires crunching against the curb. Karen Mitchell, my supervisor, stepped out, her navy blazer crisp despite the late hour. At 45, she carried herself with the kind of authority that made people listen. She strode toward us, her heels clicking on the pavement, her eyes scanning the scene, me in cuffs, the crowd, the officers. What's going on here? She demanded, her voice sharp but controlled. Grant started to explain, but she cut him off. I'm talking to Marcus. Are you okay? Her concern was real, but so was her anger, simmering just beneath the surface. I'm fine, I said, though my wrists begged to differ. They stopped me for fitting a description. No charges, no evidence. Just this. I nodded toward the cuffs. Karen's eyes narrowed, and she turned to Hayes. You've got a paralegal from Carter and Reed in handcuffs based on... What? A vague tip? Did you even ask for his ID before you did this? Hayes opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The crowd was riveted, phones still up, capturing every word. Karen didn't wait for an answer. Take those cuffs off him. Now. Hayes hesitated, his pride clearly bruised, but Grant was already moving, pulling out his keys. The cuffs clicked open, and I rubbed my wrists, the red mark stinging in the cool air. The crowd murmured, some clapping softly, others shaking their heads. The delivery guy called out, "About time!" Karen handed me my briefcase, her hand steady on my shoulder. "You shouldn't have gone through this," she said quietly, then turned back to Hayes. "I want your badge number and your supervisor's contact. This isn't over." The shift was palpable. Just minutes ago, I was a suspect, my life reduced to a stereotype. Now, with Karen there and my badge in hand, I was Marcus Thompson again, paralegal, professional, human. Hayes's face was a mask of barely concealed frustration, but he couldn't argue with the facts. My employee badge, my firm's reputation, and Karen's presence flipped the script. The crowd saw it too. The woman in the scarf approached, her voice soft but firm. "I recorded everything. I'll send it to you," she said, slipping me her card. The delivery guy nodded. "Me too. This ain't right." Karen pulled out her phone, already dialing. "I'm calling our firm's managing partner," she said, loud enough for Hayes to hear. "He's got friends at the mayor's office. They'll want to know why one of our staff was treated like this." Hayes's eyes widened slightly, and Grant looked like he wanted to disappear. I stood there, my briefcase back in my hand, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about me getting uncuffed. It was about exposing the system that let this happen, the one that saw my skin before my story. I looked at the crowd, their phones still raised, and realized they were witnesses to something bigger. The videos, the woman's card, the delivery guy's support, they were evidence, not just of my innocence, but of a pattern. Every day, people like me face this, cuffed or worse, with no Karen Mitchell to show up, no badge to prove their worth. My anger hadn't faded, but it was sharper now, focused. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for them. Hayes muttered something about procedure and backed toward the cruiser, but the damage was done. The crowd's murmurs had turned to open conversation, people talking about profiling and abuse. Karen stayed by my side, her phone still pressed to her ear, coordinating with the firm. I glanced at the woman in the scarf, who gave me a small nod, and at the delivery guy, who was still filming. This wasn't the end. It was the start of something. Maybe not justice, not yet, but truth, laid bare for everyone to see. The cruiser's taillights faded down Peachtree Street as officers Hayes and Grant drove off, their sirens silent for once. The crowd lingered, some still holding phones, others talking in low, urgent tones. Karen stood beside me, her phone call with the firm's managing partner wrapping up. My wrists were free, but the red marks from the cuffs burned, a reminder that wouldn't fade as quickly as the police car. I clutched my briefcase, its weight grounding me as I scanned the faces around me. The woman in the blue scarf was emailing me her video, her fingers quick on her phone. The delivery guy, still in his gray hoodie, gave me a nod before slipping back into the crowd. I wasn't alone anymore, but I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Karen turned to me, her voice low but firm. "Marcus, we're filing a formal complaint tomorrow. The firm's behind you." I nodded, my throat tight. The idea of justice felt distant, like a word from a textbook I'd studied years ago. But something was shifting. The crowd's chatter had grown louder, words like profiling and abuse cutting through the evening air. A man in a suit approached, introducing himself as a local reporter. "I heard what happened," he said, pulling out a notepad. "Can I get your story?" I hesitated, then gave him my contact information. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about making sure this didn't happen again. By the next morning, the incident was everywhere. The woman's video, synced with the delivery guy's footage, hit local news sites and spread across social media. My name wasn't public yet, but the story was: Black paralegal cuffed without cause in downtown Atlanta. Comments piled up online, some angry, some dismissive, others calling for Hayes's badge. Carter and Reed, issued a statement condemning the officer's actions and demanding an investigation. Karen pushed for more, meeting with the firm's partners to ensure they leaned on city officials. By noon, the Atlanta PD announced a review of Hayes and Grant's conduct, citing concerns about protocol. It wasn't a conviction, but it was a start. I went back to work that Wednesday, my desk piled with the same case files I'd been carrying. Colleagues stopped by, offering support, though some avoided my eyes, unsure what to say. I didn't blame them. What do you say to someone who was cuffed for existing? I kept my head down, reviewing documents, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the cuffs, heard Hayes's voice. People like you. I knew this wasn't over. The firm's managing partner called me in, promising legal support if I wanted to sue. I wasn't sure yet. A lawsuit might help me, but what about everyone else? A week later, the investigation gained traction. Body cam footage from Hayes and Grant surfaced, leaked by someone inside the department. It showed Hayes's aggression, his refusal to check my ID, his dismissive tone. The footage didn't lie, and neither did the crowd's videos. The mayor's office issued a public apology, and Hayes was suspended pending a full review. Grant faced lesser scrutiny, but his silence during the incident didn't go unnoticed. Online, people shared their own stories, traffic stops, store surveillances, moments of being reduced to a stereotype. I read every one, my chest tightening with each familiar detail. This wasn't just my fight. The firm started working pro bono with a local advocacy group pushing for police reforms, mandatory de-escalation training, stricter rules on stops without cause. I joined their meetings not as a paralegal but as a witness. My story carried weight, and I used it, speaking at a community forum. A month later, the room was packed, black, white, young, old, all listening as I described that night. I didn't sugarcoat it. I talked about the cuffs, the crowd, the way Hayes saw me before he knew me. When I finished, a woman in the back stood up, tears in her eyes, and said her son had been through the same thing. Others nodded. I realized then that this was bigger than one complaint or one suspension. My life didn't magically change. I was still a paralegal, still working long hours, still navigating a world that saw my skin first. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't just proving myself anymore. I was proving the system could bend. The reforms weren't perfect. Hayes's suspension didn't erase what happened, but it was a crack in the wall, a sign that one voice, backed by evidence and allies, could make a difference. I kept the woman's card from that night, the delivery guy's contact, the reporter's number. They were reminders that I hadn't been alone, and neither was anyone else. Months passed since that night on Peachtree Street, but the marks from the cuffs lingered in my mind more than on my wrists. I was still Marcus Thompson, paralegal at Carter and Reed, still grinding through case files and late-night emails, but something had changed. I wasn't just navigating the world anymore. I was pushing back. That incident, humiliating as it was, lit a fire I didn't know I had. I started speaking out, not just for myself, but for everyone who'd felt that same sting of being reduced to a stereotype. My life wasn't perfect, but it had purpose now, and that was worth more than I'd expected. I joined a local advocacy group, the same one the firm partnered with after the incident. We worked on community programs, workshops on knowing your rights, legal clinics for people wrongfully detained. I wasn't leading the charge. I was just one voice among many, but it felt right. At one event, I met a young man, barely 20, who'd been stopped by police 3 times in a year, each time for nothing. He reminded me of myself at that age, angry, scared, but determined. I gave him my card, told him to call if he needed help. He did, and we got his record cleared. It wasn't a big win in the grand scheme, But for him, it was everything. That's when I knew this work mattered. The firm gave me more responsibility, not because of the incident, but because I'd earned it. I started mentoring younger paralegals, especially those who, like me, had to fight harder to be seen. I didn't preach or dwell on my story, but when they asked, I told it straight. The cuffs, the crowd, the way Hayes's face changed when he saw my badge. They listened, some with wide eyes, others with knowing nods. One woman, a new hire, said it gave her courage to keep going. That stuck with me. If my story could help even one person stand taller, it was worth telling. I also started speaking at schools and community centers, sharing what happened that night and what came after. I didn't sugarcoat the system's flaws or pretend everything was fixed. Hayes's suspension was temporary, and though the department promised reforms, change was slow. But I told people they didn't have to stay silent. They could record, speak up, find allies. Every time I spoke, I saw faces in the crowd, mothers, students, workers who'd been through their own version of my story. Their strength fueled mine. My mission now is simple: keep telling the truth, not just about that night, but about every day after, when I chose to fight instead of hide. I'm not a hero, just a guy who got tired of being invisible. This isn't just my story, it's the story of anyone who's ever been judged before they could speak. And it's not over. It's a fight we're all in, whether we choose it or not. Thank you for listening to my story. It means a lot that you took the time to hear what happened and what I've learned. I'm just one person, but your support, whether it's sharing this, speaking out, or standing up in your own way, makes a difference. Have you ever faced a moment where you felt judged or unseen because of who you are? What did you do to push back? Or maybe you've seen something like this happen. Did you step in, record, or speak up? Share your thoughts below. Let's keep this conversation going because change starts when we stop staying silent.